This video, we're just going to talk about layers and working in layers in Pixlr. So layers in Pixlr work kind of like sheets of paper. So if I were to have a stack of papers like this, each layer would be a separate sheet of paper. I can move these sheets of paper around and change the order, and whatever's on top is what's going to show. I can also cut out things from each sheet of paper to show things beneath it. This is kind of the essential function of layers, is being able to stack them and have different things happening based on how they are stacked up. So I'm just going to jump back into Pixlr here, and I'm going to change the size so it's easier to work with. And to get your images in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Layer, and I'm going to open an image as a layer. So I'll click Open Image as Layer. This will bring me to a window here where I can find different images. And for me, I have my images all saved in the Art in the Digital World folder under Creature Images. And here's a whole bunch of pictures that I might use in my corpse creation. So to start, I'm just going to grab this one because I need a painter. I'll click Open, and here's the image. As you can see, the image is about this big. This is how big it would be fit into the resolution that I set when I put my start file in here. So if I make it bigger, I'm actually stretching the pixels. I'm making this potentially pixelated. Sometimes that's a problem depending on how big you stretch it. Sometimes it's not a problem depending on how you stretch it. Also, if you look over here, you can see I have a new layer. This is layer 1. This was the layer that I started with, my background layer. If I double click here, I can name this. I'll name it Painter Lady. And that will be my Painter Lady layer. I can move this layer around using this tool called the Move tool. Don't get that confused with the Crop tool. The Crop tool will actually crop things out and it will change the whole size of your paper. We don't generally use the Crop tool very much. Instead, we use the Move tool. The Move tool we'll use all the time. So I'm just grabbing this photograph. I can move it anywhere I want to on this paper, and you can see it's moving in the Navigator window as well. Let's grab another one. I'm going to go down to Layer, Open Image as Layer, and let's say I want to bring Vincent van Gogh in here. So I'll open this one. We'll see how big that is. Oh, that's a great big picture. That's a perfect photograph for this size. Because I'm not going to have to scale it very much, and it will fit very well. Look over at my layers panel. You'll see I have my Painter Lady layer, and I have my Van Gogh layer. I'll just label that Van Gogh. It's easy to get confused, so I would suggest after each layer that you bring in that you name them. Now these layers I can reorder just like a stack of paper. This one is hiding underneath Van Gogh. If I move this sheet of paper over, there is the lady underneath. But I can take this Painter Lady and I can reshuffle the stack so she is on top of this other piece of paper, and I can move that around so I could see it. Let's grab another one. So I'll go Open Image as Layer. Maybe I want this quinceanera cake. So I'll open this up. Here's the cake. It's an okay size. And you can see there's my new layer. They call it layer 3. I'm going to call it cake layer. And I can move these layers around. Notice when I'm on that layer, I'm only moving that layer. If I click on the Painter Lady, now I'm moving this layer. It's in between those two. If I want to move Van Gogh, that's how I move that layer. Within each of these layers, I can use this panel, or I can also use the layer drop down. And there's lots of different options on the layer drop down menu to move it around. Let's say I want to make this cake a little bit bigger. First, I'll go to the cake layer, and I can move it around just to check. Then I'm going to go up to the Edit menu, and I'm going to go down, and I'm going to go to what's called Free Transform. I'll click on that, and that gives me these little anchor points, these little dots on the ends of my cake. If I grab a corner, I can make it bigger. Notice that it's getting skewed. It's getting fatter, it's getting skinnier. I can really distort this photograph, and it can be really kind of ugly. Generally, you don't want to distort photographs unless you have a very specific reason to do that. So if I were to hold down Shift when I resize, notice it keeps, I'm just pressing the Shift button, it keeps the size from getting all wonky. So generally, whenever you're resizing something, you want to hold down Shift. So I'm just going to hold down Shift, I'll let go with my mouse, and then I'll let go of Shift, and there's my cake. Also, I can rotate this. If I go over to a corner, it's hard to see with Van Gogh there, but I get this little, rather than it being just an arrow, it turns into this little turny dial thing. And I can turn it if I wanted to. And if I hold down Shift, lo and behold, it rotates it every 45 degrees, which is kind of handy. Once I have it about the size that I want it, I need to press Enter in order to do anything else. Notice if I click on another tool, it won't let me until I apply the changes, I apply the transformation. So I click yes, and it will, and now it's changed the size. And really, when I look at this, it's not that pixelated. It's a pretty good photograph, so I don't really have to worry too much about pixelation as I make this bigger. And once I fix the size in here, realize that all those pixels have been stretched. And sometimes that can be an issue if you're resizing it, constantly, especially after you edit it. Over here, there's some other options on the layers panel. There's layer settings. If I click on that, you can see I can change the opacity, which refers to if something is see-through or not. If it's very opaque, you can't see through it. If it's very not opaque or transparent, you can see through it. There's also these modes which I can click through, and this affects how the layers are stacked. So if I click through to like difference, notice the cake will change according to what's beneath it. And this will be different if I move the layers around. So if I click off that and I put the painter lady on top of the cake, and I go back to the cake layer moving around, notice things change. Sometimes when I'm clicking on those layer modes, things will change based on something being on the top. Ooh, that's really cool. So you can kind of mess around with that and see what you can do. There's also some other options here. We have layer styles, like a drop shadow, a shadow, a bevel. That will add it to the specific layer. So let me move my painter lady out of the way, put the cake back on there, which it looks kind of neat with Van Gogh underneath. Remember, this is the cake affecting the layer beneath. Let me go back to just normal mode. And if I go to one of these layer styles, I could add a drop shadow, or an inner glow, or a bevel. And that's doing all of this stuff to the outside generally of the shape. So if I actually, you can see things changing. We'll get into that more later. I can also make a new layer that's just blank. Here's layer 4. And if you look at it, you'll see it's checkerboard in there. Whenever you see gray to white checkerboard, that means it's transparent. So there is a layer here now. Well, notice when I try and use the move tool, I cannot move something because it's a layer with nothing on it. It's just an invisible layer. But I did create a new layer. If I don't like that, I can delete it. So I'll just click on the little trash can and it's deleted. I can also hide layers by unchecking these. So now I've hidden the cake layer. It's still there. It's not deleted. It's just hidden. The painter lady is down here. Let me move her up. I could hide her if she keeps getting in the way of something I'm trying to do with the Van Gogh layer. There's also some options on the layers panel up here, such as rotating, flipping these if you needed to flip it so it's a different direction. If I went to Van Gogh and I put him on the top here, and then I go to layer, I can flip him so he's upside down. I can flip him back here. I can flip him so he's looking the other way if that's something that's important. There's all sorts of stuff. These layer masks we're not going to deal with right now. Don't worry about rasterizing at this point either. These merging and flattening, what that does is if I really like where things are at, let's say I have my cake and I want to make this a little smaller. Also, as I'm working, if I click on free transform, notice it says Control T. That's called a quick key. I can just hit that and it will go automatically to that button. I'll press enter, it'll fix it in. If I really like these two at where they're at and I want to squish them together, I can do that. If I click on layer and I do merge down, it will merge these two layers together. So now I have the cake and the Van Gogh both in the Van Gogh layer, and I cannot separate them. One key that you might use a lot is edit, undo. So I could actually go to undo, Control Z, and I could go back a couple steps. You can only go back a little ways before it doesn't do it. So I clicked, so now I have it in a separate layer. But I can go back, Control Z, to all the way back there. There's a point where you can't go back. So realize that if you make a mistake, you can go back if you remember to change it, somewhat soon. But if you don't remember to change it, you're kind of up a creek. So that's just some basic stuff about layers in Pixlr.